everyone. Welcome again. We're going to talk today about the right to remain silent. Yeah, that beautiful little thing that the police will or should say to you if you are detained. Now remember everyone that a detention is a form of arrest. Every single police officer is taught in training school, and for those who pay attention, that a detention is a form of arrest. So let's see what happens in a situation like this. Now, if you are stopped by a police officer, I want you to remember from the previous video that a traffic ticket, when you're issued one, is actually a summons. And it's a summons because you are charged with an offense, whatever that offense is. Now, if a police officer stops you, and those regular random stops, to check your documents. Now remember now, that is actually a search of your documents. Nobody don't tell me that government give you driver's license, etc., etc., etc. Government gives you everything. The land is for government. Everything that you have is for government. So let's not use that excuse. Now, if a police officer stops you and requests documents and driver's license, the minute officer requests your documents and driver's license, then one of the things that you need to say to said officer, ask that officer, what if you don't give it to them? Because remember now, there's detection by deception, whereby the officer could just very well not be invoking his authority, but be using detection by deception, asking you, and if you give it to him, if you comply, then that is waiving your constitutional rights. Nobody don't tell me about whatever happened to comply and ask questions after. No. That's just deception. Yeah? Now, so if an officer stops you and say documents and driver's license, and you ask that officer, what happens if you don't give your driver's license or documents? And then the officer will therefore say, then you're not free to go. And then you say to that officer, well, am I detained? Well, obviously, not free to go mean detained, but you wanted to confirm. And he'll say, you might say, well, if I don't want to look at it, well, am I free to go? No, well, I'm detained. All right? Ask that officer, is detention a form of arrest? Said officer might be reluctant to say yes or no, but you're asking. You will have to say yes, because that's what they're taught in training school, that detention is a form of arrest. So if you are detained and you are arrested, then ask that said officer, then if I am arrested or detained, then please read me or read you your Miranda rights. And said officer would have to read something like this, in whatever version or whichever way. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be appointed to you. And that, my friends, that officer would have just read you your rights. And that's where, by the very act of just asking you for documents and driver's license, he can't then say that is why he detained you. No. You can't detain me to search for an offense. You can't arrest me to see if I've committed an offense. For you to detain someone, said person must have either committed an offense or would have been suspected at the very least of having committed one or is about to commit one. And those suspicions have to be reasonable. Am I making sense? I know you're all following what's going on. So when this officer read you your rights and tell you that you have the right to remain silent, he cannot now say he's detaining you because you're refusing to give driver's license and documents. No, that can't be the reason he's detaining you. He must have detained you for some reason previous to that, and then say you fail to give documents or driver's license is an additional charge. But if he can't justify, if that officer can't justify the first reason he stopped you, and that he had some reasonable suspicion or reasonable or probable cause to do such a detention, then that case is dead in the waters. And that's one of the principles under which this random stop for documents and driver's license don't make sense. The law itself, the New Road Traffic Act, nor regulation does not give the police in Jamaica any power to randomly stop someone and request document and driver's license, because that will be a search of your property, and you have the constitutional right to protection from search. Arbitrary arrest. Yep. Those are rights guaranteed by the Constitution. You have a right to liberty. You have a right to freedom of movement. You have a right to privacy of your home and your property. Your documents and your driver's license are property of yours. Those rights can only be abridged or abrogated if, based on the Constitution, the officer has reasonable or probable cause of an offense. Only an offense can allow an officer to abridge or abrogate those rights. And some of these rights can only be abridged or abrogated if said officer has a search warrant. Otherwise, the search would not be reasonable. Don't get me wrong, sometimes all the officer needs is a probable cause to justify a search and does not need a search warrant. But then there are other times when one is required. So remember, when the officer read you your rights and tell you you have the right to remain silent, and that anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law, and that's anything you say or do, yes, can and will be used against you in the court of law, then if the officer then said documents and driver's license, all the officer to the officer is, well, you just tell me, say me have the right to remain silent. Anything I say can and will be used against you in the court of law. So that is the right that you're exercising, the right to remain silent. Because what if your driver's license are in the trunk? You don't want to say, officer, in the trunk. For the officer go say, come out of the car, go for them. Because he can't even tell them to come out of the car unless he's suspect of some offense. Yeah? So, you don't want to say they're in the trunk. You don't want to say they're somewhere because they may very well be in the trunk and not in the car. And you don't want to move to give it to him or do something, and then because you're detained or arrested based on what the law says and what's going on there, you don't want to do something and the officer use that and say, oh, you did not do that. You know what I'm saying? But if you are lawfully stopped in a detention, or even if you are unlawfully detained, the only thing the law requires you to do is to identify yourself. Because you don't want a situation to exist where if you don't identify yourself, then you, will not be free to go. But identifying yourself don't require a driver's license. All it requires is some valid ID, your passport, your voter's ID, or now them NITS card that will soon come out, yeah? Or any form of ID. You don't need to give those papers, those insurance and those things. But if the officer's stop is justified, you have to give it to him. If you don't, the charges of failing to produce driver's license, failing to produce insurance, and fitness, all of those charges will stick. But because said officer did not have reasonable or probable cause from day one to detain you, nothing that comes from an unlawful stop can stick, based on the principle of ex nihilo nihilifit. I always can't pronounce that right. Which means nothing comes from nothing. It's a principle of nullity. Yep. Where the procedure was not done right from the start, it's done unlawfully, then nothing flows from nothing. Wrong procedure from the start, if illegally stop you or unlawfully stop you from the start, then if I'm unlawfully stop you and write a ticket and all them things, then again, the principle of ex nihilo nihil fit is that nothing comes from nothing, which means the law says nothing can come of what flows from that unlawful stop. So make sure you understand the law and know the law very well. So officers might try to intimidate you, but that is the law. When we know the law, we're able to be in command of our situations. Guys, remember, the damages for breaches of constitutional rights are enormous. The values go up for different breaches. Yeah? So, be on the right side of the law at all times. Ensure that your documents and your driver's license and your vehicle is fit and proper for the road, that you obey all the rules and the regulations of the road. But don't let the police deceive you into breaching your constitutional rights. It does not make sense that we were given these rights by the Constitution and the same state taking them away and making them appear as if they don't exist. No police in Jamaica has the right, or nobody at all have the right to randomly stop you, stop your freedom of movement, randomly prevent you from being able to move about, taking away your liberty. Nobody